I was talking to a student today, and he was telling me about how folks voted their conscience and in this last presidential election, and that's kind of what the driver was. And I argue that maybe for your congressperson, maybe for your House member, or maybe for your Senate person, but not for president. And that's still a big maybe. Voting your morality, or voting, obviously a lot of us get our morality from religious beliefs, and that's okay. But the United States government established a separation between church and state right from 1787, right? The United States Constitution was not going to be passed without the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights establishes there should be no establishment of religion for the U.S. government. What does that mean, and why is that the case? The Federalist Papers was a set of papers, I don't know if you've watched Hamilton, but written by John Jay, Madison, and Hamilton, sort of making an argument for why the United States needed to adopt the Constitution. On the other side of the argument, you had the anti-federalists that argued that this establishment of the Constitution gave the federal government too much power, and they were afraid that that if you give the government this much power, that tyranny is right on the way, right? This sort of kingdom, right? This kingdom is on the way, and we are then, subject to all kinds of oppression. I want to point specifically to Brutus number 12, because Brutus number 12, which is an anti-federalist paper, makes very, very clear a few points that says, look, this country needs to have some kind of freedom of religion. And he makes several remarks about this. He goes on to say, the liberty of the press, the newspapers, trial by jury, and the freedom of the conscience are the most essential, the most important of all the liberties of all people. Now, when you talk about freedom of the conscience, he is talking about moral ideas, aka religion. It is the most essential, right? He goes on to say, the Constitution as it stands, as it was written, he argues against, Hamilton, Jay, and Madison, that the Constitution as it stands will be likely to give an undue influence to the national government, to the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, which may interfere with the religious rights of the people. Look, this Brutus number 12 paper is really concerned about religious freedom from the government, right? He goes on to say that there is nothing in the Constitution, and he was right. There's nothing currently in the Constitution that explicitly secures the free exercise of religion or prevents the establishment of a national religion. Remember the backdrop in which all of this is happening. Europeans were fleeing Europe for several reasons and coming to the new land. Obviously economic opportunity was one of them, but another one was religious persecution. Folks were being persecuted in Europe for their religious beliefs. That's where all these ideas come from, where, at some point in time, there's going to be some oppression based on our religious beliefs. Well, that was happening in Europe. And folks were fleeing Europe and coming to this land we now call America to get away from that. And under no stances, that were the folks that were writing the anti-federalist papers wanted to get back into that sort of tyranny or that sort of oppression. They didn't want that. And so all of this argument culminated in what we now know as the Bill of Rights. And lo and behold, the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution in the Bill of Rights, the very first one, which means that it's probably the most important. as Brutus number 12 says this. Congress, the very first line too, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Congress, keep your mucky hands off of folks' moral beliefs. As long as it's not like hurting anybody or killing anybody, keep your hands off of folks' moral belief. What happens if you are a Lutheran and for some reason the Catholic Church sort of got the reins and the lawmakers in Congress decided that the Catholic Church was the religion that should be the national religion? What happens to all the Lutheran practices? What if Congress decides that it's, I don't know, Pentecostal? You know what? Pentecostals should be like the national religion. That should be it. I think morally the Pentecostals they're on it. They're that's the one. That's it. What happens to all the Seventh-day Adventists that have stark differences in their belief system? What happens? And so folks like to think about the United States as a Christian country, but don't realize that the United States is probably less of a Christian country and more of a religious freedom type of a country. Look, you can practice whatever religion you like, Protestant, evangelical, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, Seventh-day Adventist. You can practice it, or you could not practice at all, and you're free to do that, right? That is the freedom of conscience that Brutus was talking about. Because we don't want to get into a position where there is a national religion, because we know what that looks like. Because your national religion, even if it's some Christian religion, may not necessarily align to everything you believe in, then morally you're going to be at a crossroads. Because it will be against the law to practice the way you practice. That's how the Constitution was set up, with a Bill of Rights that protects individuals' rights to practice whatever religion they choose or no religion at all. And when we cannot implement that in our government, religion has to come out of our government. Because again, I will ask you, what happens if the religious practices that are followed by the United States government does not align with yours? What's next? What happens when the laws created by the United States government that follow a moral path of a religion that does not align with yours? What do you do? Is that when you go to the mountains to flee? Is that when you go to the mountains to hide? Is that what happens then? So I tell you what, if you were preparing to go in the mountains and hide, and the government wanted to find you, they'll find you. They'll find you. The technology today in the year of our Lord, 2024, is not like how it was when the Bible was written. It was not like how it was when the Constitution was written in 1787. Oh, it's a lot deeper. There is no wilderness you can escape to without being found. That's something that we need to think about. There is a separation between church and state. Because if you establish a religion, if you establish a religion that the First Amendment tells us not to do, you're going to have 300 million plus people either following that religion or experiencing some real difficulty. What side would you be on?